Her name was Linda. If you saw her outside, you would never believe she had any bad thing inside her. She was very beautiful. Anytime she walked on the street, men would turn and look at her. Some would even forget where they were going. But inside this beauty, there was a big secret. Linda was not just an ordinary woman. Every night, at exactly 12 o'clock midnight, something strange happened to her. Her body would start changing. Her smooth skin would turn rough. Her hands and legs would join together. Before you know it, she had turned into a giant green snake. Now you might be thinking, why will a woman become a snake? Well, that was her own power. But she was not using it for good. She used it to harm people. Every night, after she turned into a snake, she would crawl out of her husband's house. She would enter her neighbors' homes quietly, without anyone seeing her. Then she would crawl into their kitchen, go straight into their pot of food, and drop her poison inside. By morning, the family would wake up, warm the food, and eat. But once they ate it, they would fall down and die instantly. Nobody knew what was happening. People started wondering, who is poisoning our food like this? But nobody even thought of Linda. How could they? She looked too beautiful, too innocent. Even her husband, David, did not suspect anything. He loved her so much. He believed he had married the best woman in the world. He even brought her from the village to the city, thinking he had found a wife that would make his life sweet. He never knew he had carried trouble and put it in his own house. The neighbors who died first were Mr. and Mrs. Brown. They ate the food Linda poisoned, and by morning they were gone. The whole street was confused. Nobody knew who did it. People cried, people were scared. They kept asking questions, but no answer came. And do you know the shocking part? Linda could not just change into a snake at any time, no. She had her own law. She could only turn into a snake from 12 midnight, and she must turn back into a human before 6 o'clock in the morning. If 6 o'clock met her in snake form, she would remain a snake forever. That was Linda's big secret. A beautiful woman in the day, but a wicked green snake in the night. That night, after Mr. and Mrs. Brown died, the whole street was shaking with fear. People whispered in groups, "What is happening in this place? Why are our neighbors dying one after the other?" Nobody had an answer. Nobody suspected Linda at all. But something small happened inside Linda's own house. Around midnight, after Linda had changed into a snake and crawled outside, her husband David woke up. At first, he just turned on the bed and stretched his hand. He didn't feel his wife beside him. Maybe she went to the back room, he thought. He waited. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 10 minutes. Linda did not return. David began to worry. He got up, walked around the house and called softly, "Linda, where are you?" But the house was silent. He checked the toilet, empty. He checked the kitchen, empty. Even the wardrobe, nothing. His heart started beating fast. Where could she have gone at this time? Just then, he heard a sound outside, something like a hiss. David turned and saw a green snake crawling very fast into the compound. His eyes grew wide. "A snake? In my house?" he said, picking up a stick to chase it. The snake slipped quickly through the window and into the bedroom. David rushed after it, but by the time he entered the room, there was no snake anymore. Instead, he saw his wife Linda standing by the wardrobe. She smiled quickly and said, "Honey, you're awake. Why are you looking for me?" David looked confused. "Where were you? I've been searching for you everywhere." "I was here," Linda lied calmly. "I only went to the wardrobe to take something. When I came back, I didn't see you on the bed." "But I checked the wardrobe. You weren't there," David said, scratching his head. Linda moved closer and touched his arm. "My love, you're only tired. Please don't stress yourself. Let's go back to sleep." David stood there for a while, still holding the stick in his hand. Something didn't feel right. He could not explain it, but his spirit was not at peace. He dropped the stick and slowly lay back down. That night, Linda smiled secretly. She knew she was almost caught. If David had hit the snake, maybe she would not be alive again. But she escaped.
The next morning, news came again. Another neighbor had died mysteriously. The community grew more afraid. David was more confused than ever.
Days passed, but the fear in the street only grew bigger. More people were falling mysteriously. Doctors came, police came, but nobody could explain it. To them, it was like death was just walking around and choosing people. In Linda's house, things looked normal on the outside, but deep inside, David's heart was restless. He could not forget that night he saw a snake crawl inside and suddenly found his wife standing there. He kept thinking, what if that snake and Linda are somehow connected? But each time, he shook the thought away. No, it can't be. She is my wife. She is too beautiful, too gentle. Then one weekend, David's younger sister Emily came to visit them. Emily loved her brother very much. She also liked Linda because at first, Linda pretended to be a very kind and caring wife. She welcomed Emily warmly, cooked for her, and smiled a lot. But Emily was very observant. She started noticing small things. One day, she walked into the kitchen and saw Linda eating something strange from a small black pot. It didn't look like food humans should eat. It looked more like crushed herbs mixed with raw meat. The smell alone made Emily's stomach turn. "Linda, what is this you are eating?" Emily asked, surprised. Linda quickly covered the pot and snapped, "Mind your business. Must you enter everywhere?" Emily raised her hands. "Sorry, I was only concerned. This kind of food doesn't look safe. It can harm your body. You are my brother's wife and I don't want anything bad to happen to you." But instead of appreciating her, she shouted, "So now I can't eat what I like again? Please, leave me alone." Emily shook her head and quietly left the kitchen. She didn't want to quarrel. Later that evening, she went to her brother. "David," Emily said gently, "please, I need to tell you something. I saw your wife eating some very strange food today. It looked dangerous. Please warn her to stop. I'm afraid it might hurt her health." David sighed. He loved his sister, and he trusted her words. That night, he sat Linda down and said, "Linda, please stop eating whatever that was. I don't want to lose you. It's dangerous. Promise me you will never touch it again." Linda's face changed immediately. Anger rose inside her like fire. That food was not ordinary food. It was what kept her alive as a snake. Without it, she could not survive. But she could not tell David that secret. So she just nodded slowly, pretending to agree. Deep inside, she was boiling. How dare Emily interfere in my life? How dare she tell David what I eat? That very night, Linda's mind was made up. Emily had crossed the line and Linda was not going to forgive her. That night, Linda could not sleep. She lay beside David, but her mind was on one thing. Emily must pay. By 12 midnight, when the clock struck, Linda changed into her true form. Her beautiful skin peeled away, her body twisted and stretched, and before long, a huge green snake hissed softly in the dark room. She slithered out through a small gap in the window and went straight to the guest room where Emily was sleeping. Emily was fast asleep, breathing softly, covered in her blanket. She didn't know danger was right there beside her bed. The snake, Linda, opened her mouth wide, ready to strike, but something strange happened. Emily suddenly turned on the bed and started praying in her dream. Her lips moved, whispering what she didn't even know she was saying. Linda hissed loudly, annoyed. The prayer was disturbing her spirit. She could not attack. She twisted angrily, knocked over a chair in the room, and quickly crawled out before anyone could wake up. The sound woke Emily. She sat up and looked around. The chair was on the ground. Did I kick it while sleeping? She wondered. Then she felt something cold near her feet, like a trail, like slime. It looked as if a snake had passed by. Her heart jumped. A snake? In this room? The next morning, Emily told David, "Something strange happened last night. I think a snake entered my room. Please call someone to check." David immediately searched the room with a torchlight. He didn't find any snake, but he saw the same slime trail Emily had noticed. His heart skipped a beat.
He remembered that night he saw a green snake crawl into his house. Slowly, the puzzle in his mind was connecting. Could it be? No, it can't be Linda. But why is this happening only when she's around? Emily could sense her brother's confusion. She touched his arm and said, "Brother, please be careful. Something is not right in this house." But Linda, standing at the door and listening, clenched her fist. Her eyes flashed with anger. "Emily is spoiling everything. If I don't remove her, she will expose me to David." That very evening, Linda smiled sweetly and pretended to be kind again. But inside, she was already planning her next move. Emily had escaped once, but she would not escape again.
The next night came, and Linda was more determined than ever. She told herself, tonight, Emily will not survive. At exactly 12 midnight, Linda transformed again into her snake form. Her body stretched, her eyes glowed red, and her tongue hissed out, tasting the air. She was hungry for revenge. She slithered straight to Emily's room. This time, she moved slower and quieter. She didn't want to wake her prey. Emily was lying on her bed, but she was not fully asleep. Since that strange night before, she had been restless. Her spirit was not at peace. She felt like something evil was watching her. Suddenly, Emily heard a soft hiss. She froze. Her eyes slowly opened, and to her shock, she saw a huge green snake crawling toward her bed. Her heart jumped to her throat. She wanted to scream, but fear held her voice. The snake came closer, raising its head high, ready to strike. At the last second, Emily managed to shout, "Snake! Snake! Snake!" David, who was sleeping in his room, jumped up at once. He rushed into Emily's room with a torch and a stick in his hand. The bright torchlight flashed directly on the snake. For a split second, David's eyes widened. He recognized that same green snake again, the same one he had seen weeks ago. He shouted, "What is this snake doing in my house again?" and raised the stick to strike. But before he could bring it down, the snake hissed loudly, twisted his body, and slipped out through the window into the night. David chased it outside but could not catch it. When he came back, Emily was shaking on her bed. "Brother, that snake wanted to kill me," she cried. David sat down heavily, his mind spinning. This was not ordinary snake. Why did it keep coming into his house? And why did it always disappear whenever Linda was not around? The more he thought, the more afraid he became. But still, he could not bring himself to suspect his wife directly. He just hugged his sister and said, "Don't worry, Emily, I will protect you." But deep down, David knew he had to find out the truth fast. And Linda? She returned to the room, pretending to have just woken up from sleep. She acted surprised when David told her about the snake. "Oh my God," she cried, holding her chest. "A snake in our house? This is terrible. Thank God you and Emily are safe." But inside, she was furious. Twice she had failed to kill Emily. She promised herself, "The third time, I will not miss." David could not sleep that night. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking deeply. "Why is it always that same green snake?" he asked himself. "Why does it always come to this house? And why does it always disappear without anyone catching it?" The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. In the morning, Emily came to him again. Her face was pale, her eyes red from fear. "Brother, I can't stay in this house anymore. That snake will kill me one day. Please do something." David hugged her gently. "Calm down, Emily. Don't worry. I will not allow anything to happen to you." But in his heart, he was troubled. He began to look closely at Linda, his wife. He noticed small things he had ignored before. Sometimes at night, she disappeared from the bed and returned hours later. Sometimes he caught her eating strange food that looked like dry powder mixed with red liquid. And sometimes her eyes looked different in the dark, shining like they belonged to something else. He shook his head. No, this is my wife. She is too beautiful, too gentle. She can never be the reason behind these deaths." But his mind refused to rest. That same evening, Emily whispered to him, "Brother,
Watch your wife closely. I don't trust her. David became angry. Don't talk about my wife like that. Linda loves me. She can never harm anyone. Emily sighed. I pray you are right, but open your eyes. Evil can hide in beauty. Those words stayed in his heart like a wound. That night, he pretended to sleep. He closed his eyes but left his ears open. At exactly 12 midnight, he felt movement on the bed. Slowly, Linda stood up and left the room without making a sound. David's heart began to beat fast. He quietly followed her, step by step. He watched as she entered the guest room and locked the door. He pressed his ear to the door. What he heard made his blood run cold. There was strange hissing sound inside the room, heavy movements like something crawling on the floor. His hands began to shake. Fear covered his whole body, but he stayed there, waiting, listening. After some minutes, the door opened slowly and a huge green snake slid out into the corridor. David almost screamed, but his mouth was too dry. His eyes grew wide. It's true, it's her, he thought, as the snake slithered away into the night. David stood frozen in the corridor, his body trembling like a leaf in the wind. He had just seen it with his own eyes. A green snake had come out of the same room his wife entered. He whispered to himself, "No, it can't be. Not Linda, my own wife." But the evidence was too clear. Slowly, he walked back into his room, sat on the bed, and buried his face in his hands. His mind was racing. So all the strange deaths, all the poisonings, all the mysterious attacks, could it be Linda behind them? He didn't want to believe it, but the picture was fitting together like a puzzle. Meanwhile, Linda was outside in her snake form, crawling towards another neighbor's kitchen. She slipped inside, hissed softly, and entered their cooking pot as usual, leaving her deadly poison behind. By the time she returned around 4 a.m., David was still awake, pretending to be asleep. He watched her carefully. She crawled through the window as a snake, then right there in the dark bedroom, her body began to twist and change. Scales disappeared, her long snake tail folded back into legs. Slowly, she turned back into Linda, the beautiful woman he married. David's chest grew tight. He wanted to scream, but the shock tied his tongue. Linda wiped her forehead like nothing had happened, walked quietly to the bed, and whispered, "Honey, are you asleep?" David quickly closed his eyes and pretended to snore. She smiled to herself, laid beside him, and dozed off. But David could not sleep a wink. His mind was full of fear. The truth was now clear. His wife was not just Linda. She was a snake woman. And he was living under the same roof with her. David could not eat, he could not sleep, and he could not even smile again. The picture of Linda changing into a snake was stuck in his mind like a wound that refused to heal. Every time she smiled at him, he remembered her sharp snake fangs. Every time she cooked for him, he imagined poison in the food. Every time she touched him, he felt cold all over. But he kept quiet. He pretended not to know anything. Inside his heart, David was planning. How do I survive this? How do I escape? And how do I protect Emily? He thought about running away. But if he tried to leave, Linda might sense it and strike. He thought about telling Emily, but he feared Linda would target her again. He even thought about reporting to the police. But who would believe such a story? They would laugh at him. So David stayed quiet. He watched, he observed, and he waited. One evening, Emily noticed her brother's face. "You look sick. Are you okay?" she asked. David forced this smile. "I'm fine, just tired." But Emily shook her head. "Brother, something is wrong. I can see it in your eyes." David wanted to tell her everything right there, but he was too scared. If Linda overheard, both of them could be gone before morning. Instead, he whispered, "Pray, Emily. Just pray very hard. Evil is near us." Emily frowned, confused, but she didn't press further. That night, David pretended to sleep again. At exactly midnight, Linda arose from the bed. He watched her walk to the corner, her body twisting, her skin changing, and once again she turned into the snake. This time, David followed quietly from a distance, his heart beating fast. He saw her slip into the neighbor's house. He heard faint noises. By morning, the news spread. Another family had died mysteriously. David clenched his fists. "Enough is enough," he muttered to himself. He now knew he had to act before his wife destroyed everyone in the neighborhood. But the question was how?
David woke up the next morning with a plan forming in his head. He could not just sit and watch Linda destroy more people. He had to be smart. So that evening, he went to the market and bought a strong wooden stick, a small bag of salt, and kerosene. He had once heard an elder say that snakes hated salt and fire. When he returned, he hid them in a corner of his room. Emily saw him sneaking in with the bag and asked, "Brother, what are you hiding?" David shook his head quickly. "Nothing, just leave it." Emily didn't push further, but she could see the worry in his eyes. That night, David waited again. At exactly 12 midnight, Linda stood from the bed, her body twisting and changing until she became the green snake. She slithered out of the room as usual. David followed silently. This time, he sprinkled a little salt on the floor near the window. He wanted to see if the snake would react when it returned. Hours later, Linda returned from her evil trip. She crawled through the window, but the moment her body touched the salt, she jagged violently and hissed loudly. Her scales burned where the salt touched. David's eyes widened. It's true, she hates salt. Quickly, the snake twisted and leapt past the spot, crawling into the bedroom. Within seconds, it transformed back into Linda. She pretended as if nothing happened, lying beside David with a fake yawn. "Honey, did you sleep well?" David pretended to be half asleep. Yes. But inside, he was sure now. Salt and fire were her weakness. That morning, he told Emily quietly, "Don't ever eat food from Linda, and always keep salt close to you. It may save your life." Emily's eyes grew wide. "Brother, what are you saying? Are you finally telling me that?" David put his finger on his lips. "Shh! Don't say it out loud. Just do as I say." Emily nodded slowly. David was ready. The first trap had worked. The next time, he would strike. David was no longer the same man. Fear was still in his chest, but now he carried a small kind of courage. At least he had found something that could hurt Linda. So he started planning his second trap. This time, he kept a small bowl of salt water under the bed and another one at the window. He also kept the stick close by, waiting for midnight. When the clock ticked 12, Linda rose again, her body twisting and changing into the green snake. David pretended to sleep, but his eyes were half open, watching carefully. The snake slithered toward the window to crawl out, but suddenly, its body touched the bowl of salt water. It hissed loudly, its scales burning again. Linda stopped and froze. She looked around carefully, her red snake eyes scanning the room. David's heart skipped. "Oh no, she will know it's me." The snake twisted back, staring at the bed. David shut his eyes quickly and pretended to snore. For a long moment, the snake just stayed there, watching him. Then slowly, it hissed again and crawled through the other side of the window where there was no salt. David opened his eyes after she left. His chest was beating so hard he thought it would break. "She almost caught me," he whispered to himself, "but I can't stop now." Hours later, Linda returned, this time avoiding the window where the salt water was. She slipped back into the room and changed into her human form. But she didn't lie down immediately. She stood beside David, looking at him with a strange smile. "Honey, are you awake?" David kept his eyes shut. She leaned closer,
staring at his face. You are such a deep sleeper, right? Nothing can ever disturb you, right? David forced himself not to move, not even to breathe too loudly. After a while, Linda finally lay down beside him. But David knew. She was beginning to suspect. One more mistake and she would discover he knew her secret.
The next morning, David sat alone in the sitting room, staring at the wall. His hands were shaking. His eyes were tired. He had not slept well for many nights. I can't live like this anymore, he thought. This woman will kill me one day if I don't do something. Emily came to sit beside him. Brother, you are losing weight. What's happening to you? David looked around to make sure Linda was not near. Then he whispered, Emily, listen carefully. One day soon, you and I may have to leave this house in the middle of the night. Be ready. Emily's eyes widened. Brother, I knew it. I knew there is something wrong with Linda. Please tell me the truth. What have you seen? David shook his head. Not now. Just keep your salt with you. And never, ever eat from her pot. Emily nodded, fear written all over her face. Meanwhile, Linda was in the bedroom, listening from behind the door. She could not hear the full conversation, but she sensed that David and Emily were hiding something from her. Her eyes narrowed. They are planning something. I must be careful. That night, David didn't even pretend to sleep. He was wide awake, waiting for midnight. At exactly 12, Linda rose from the bed again. Her body twisted, her face stretched, and she became the snake once more. This time, David's fear was mixed with anger. He whispered to himself, One day, I will finish this evil. One day. He watched her crawl out of the room and leave the house. But instead of following her, he packed a small bag with clothes, money, and a little bottle of salt. He hid the bag under the bed. He was preparing for the day he and Emily would escape. But deep down, he knew escaping might not be so easy. Linda was powerful, and she always seemed to know when people were against her. For now, all he could do was wait and plan. For days, Linda kept watching David closely. She noticed he no longer looked at her the same way. His eyes were always heavy, filled with worry. He hardly ate her food, and he spent more time whispering with Emily. One evening, Linda smiled sweetly and said, Honey, don't you love me anymore? You don't eat my food again. You don't even laugh with me. Did I do something wrong? David forced a smile. No, you didn't do anything. I'm just stressed from work. But Linda wasn't convinced. Deep inside, she was sure David was hiding something. That night, at exactly 12 midnight, she transformed into her snake form again. But instead of leaving the house, she stayed behind in the shadows, watching David. She wanted to see if he was pretending. David lay still on the bed, his heart beating fast. He knew she was still there. He could hear the soft hiss in the darkness. Minutes passed and the snake didn't move. It was watching him closely. David pretended to snore, even though his body was shaking under the blanket. Finally, Linda hissed softly and crawled away, slipping out of the window. David sat up at once, sweat covering his face. She suspects me. She's testing me. When Emily woke up later, David told her, From now on, we must be very careful. Linda's beginning to suspect us. Don't say anything. Don't even look at her strangely. Just act normal. Emily nodded, fear in her eyes. The danger was now greater. Linda was watching, and one mistake could mean death. Linda could not rest. Her husband was growing cold toward her, and she was sure Emily had something to do with it. Since that girl came here, my husband has been changing, she hissed to herself one night. She is the one poisoning his mind against me. She must go. So she made her decision. Emily will not see another sunrise. At exactly 12 midnight, Linda transformed once more into a snake form. Her eyes glowed red, her tongue flicked in and out, and she slithered silently through the corridor toward Emily's room. Emily was fast asleep, clutching her small packet of salt that David had given her. But even in sleep, her spirit was uneasy. She turned from side to side, muttering softly. Suddenly, the cold hiss of the snake filled the air. Emily's eyes shot open. Right at the foot of her bed, she saw the green snake raising its head, ready to strike. Her heart jumped.
She screamed at the top of her voice, "Brother! Brother!" David woke with a start, grabbed the stick he kept near his bed, and rushed into Emily's room. The snake was already on the bed, its mouth wide open, fangs ready. Emily, shaking, quickly poured the salt from her packet onto the snake. Sss! The snake screamed as its body burned from the salt. It twisted violently and leapt off the bed, knocking over a chair. David wasted no time. He lifted the stick and struck at the snake with all his strength. But the snake moved too fast, slithering under the door and escaping into the darkness. David held Emily tight as she cried uncontrollably. "Brother, she will kill me. She will not stop until I'm gone." David's eyes were red with anger. "Not while I'm alive. We will fight her. She will not win." But deep inside, he knew things were getting more dangerous. Linda was no longer hiding her hatred for Emily. The house was no longer safe. And if they stayed much longer, someone was surely going to die. Fear had filled the whole street. People were too scared to sleep alone. Mothers kept their children close. Shop owners closed early. The talk of the town was the green snake that kept coming to the houses. Davis could not wait any longer. He went from door to door and spoke to the neighbors. He told them what he had seen and what salt could do to the snake. At first, many people laughed, but when more families started dying, they took him seriously. 7 brave men from the street agreed to help. They made a plan. Each night, some of them would stay outside and watch. They would carry lamps, long sticks, and a big sack. If they saw the snake, they would catch it and keep it safe. That night, they waited quietly in the dark. At exactly 12 o'clock, Linda changed into the snake and slithered out as usual. The men saw her moving along the walkway, a long green body flashing in the torchlight. "Look," one of them whispered. They rushed after the snake, shouting and shining lights. The snake ran fast, but the men were many. One of them swung his stick, another threw a net, and together they knocked the snake down gently. Then they put her inside the big sack and tied it up. The sack looked heavy on the ground. The men were proud and laughing. They said they would take the snake to the checkpoint and call the elders. They planned to make a fire and prepare pepper to dry the snake. Nobody thought to check if it was alive because it lay quiet and still. Inside the sack, the snake, who was really Linda, felt fear for the first time that night. She knew time was moving. If she could not change back into a woman before 6 in the morning, she would be a snake forever. She used her soft teeth and little strength to chew the sack quietly. Little by little, the bag began to tear. The men outside were talking and joking. They felt safe. They did not watch the sack closely. While their backs were turned, Linda pushed herself through the hole she had made. She crawled out and ran fast into the dark. The men only saw a small shadow disappear and thought maybe the sack had torn and the animal had run away. Linda hid and moved quickly straight to her house. She slipped through the window and into the bedroom. Right there, before the sun could come, her body changed. The snake body shrank and twin legs came out. Scales fell off, and the woman they knew stood up. Linda looked like nothing had happened. She walked into the room where David waited, pretending to sleep. When he saw her, he held the stick but said nothing. Linda smiled and acted as if she had only been out praying or walking in the night. She lied and told him a small story so he would give up watching her. David did not shout. He kept quiet because he feared for his life and for Emily. But inside his heart, anger and fear burned together. The men who had caught the snake were angry when they came back to the checkpoint and realized it had escaped. They promised they would find it again. They did not know Linda would come back later and do terrible things to them because they had tried to catch her. That night, everyone felt a little safer, but only for a little while. Linda had escaped the sack and lived to go back to her dark work. The street was still not safe.
After the snake escaped from the sack, David could no longer rest. His heart told him plainly if he stayed with Linda, he would not live long. Every day, she smiled sweetly at him, but he knew what she really was. Emily also begged him, "Brother, please, leave her before she kills us both." At first, David feared what people would say. How would he tell the town that his wife was a snake woman? Who would believe such a story?
But the deaths on the street kept increasing. More neighbors were poisoned in their food, and everyone was whispering about the mysterious creature that nobody could catch. One afternoon, David made his decision. He went quietly to his family and told them everything he had seen, how Linda changed at midnight, how she turned into a green snake, how Emily almost died. His relatives were shocked. An elder in the family said, "My son, you must not remain with such a woman. It is better you take another wife who is human and safe." David agreed. He secretly began making plans. Within a short time, with the help of his people, he married another woman named Sarah. She was gentle, kind, and loved Emily like her own sister. When Linda heard the news, her face darkened. She pretended to smile in front of others, but deep inside, jealousy and anger burned like fire. So, he dares to bring another woman into this house. Me, Linda, after everything. She swore in her heart that David and Sarah would regret it. That night, Linda did not transform or leave the house. She lay awake beside David, her eyes wide open, thinking. She knew the time for hiding was almost over. And David, though he now had a new wife, also knew one thing clearly. The battle with Linda was far from finished. The street was still in danger. His family was still in danger. And sooner or later, Linda would strike again. The war between love and evil had only just begun. We hope you enjoyed this chilling tale. As we wait for the next episode, make sure to subscribe, like, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We want to know how far this dark story has traveled. Keep your popcorn close, because what's coming next will make you question everything you think you know about people.